Welcome, welcome to this edition of the Astrological Weather Report. My name is Daniel Fiverson. Today, I want to talk about the future. And along the way, we're going to revisit the past and we're going to re-examine or examine the present. So, who is Eris? She's known as the Greek goddess of strife and discord. And she had one daughter, which is also the name of her moon, which is named Dysnomia. And Dysnomia was the goddess of lawlessness. So already you can see that there's a theme that's building here, just in terms of what it is that these goddesses were about. She was once considered to be the 10th planet of the solar system. And actually, when she was discovered, she upset both the worlds of astronomy and astrology alike. Which is probably a pretty well-known story now. But just to back up a little bit, she was actually not discovered until Sedna was captured on film, because Eris's orbit is 500 years long, and she moves so slowly that when she was first captured, the first images that Mike Brown at Palomar caught of her, they thought that she was actually a fixed star. And a couple of years later, when they identified Sedna, they saw that Eris had moved, and they recognized that she was indeed a planet. But her discovery changed everything, because it caused the AIU, the Astrological International Union, to redefine what it was to be a planet. And as a result, Pluto, who is really the basis of all of our evolutionary astrology, was demoted, which is still pretty contentious for many of us. And Ceres, which was an asteroid, the only asteroid that's actually perfectly spherical in the asteroid belt, was promoted to be a minor star, minor planet. So it really turned astronomy and astrology upside down. And I think that people, astrologers and astronomers, are probably still debating it. She has an orbital period, as I said, of 557 years. She's I think I have this in the next slide. No, I'll go back here. She's actually the same size as Pluto. It's very similar to Pluto, but she is 2 Pluto distances away from the sun. She's twice as far from the sun as Pluto. Pluto's orbit is 248 years, and her orbit is over 500 years. So she moves very, very slowly. Mythologically, she's known as the one who tossed the golden apple into the wedding of Thetis and I'm sorry, I'm missing a mythological name, but the future parents of Achilles. And she threw a golden apple into, she was not invited. Chiron was in charge of sending out the invitations. And he knew that if Eris showed up, she would probably cause some trouble. So he didn't send her an invitation. Well, guess what? She showed up anyway. And she brought with her a golden apple, and on it said to the fairest. And it began a contest between Hera, Aphrodite, and Pallas Athena, as to who was the fairest. To cut the story a little shorter, Aphrodite actually won the contest because Zeus had chosen Paris, who was the son of the king of Sparta, to be the judge. Zeus did not want to be the judge himself, because he felt he was too close to, too much personal interest. So he asked Paris to choose, and so Paris chose Aphrodite, who promised him the fairest, the most beautiful woman in the world, and that woman was Helen of Troy. There's also a lot of mythology about Helen of Troy. She was also the mortal twin sister to an immortal, just like the Gemini twins. But that's another whole presentation. But at any rate, Paris and Helen ran off to Troy. What is probably not known as part of the story is that when Menelaus, who Helen was married to Menelaus, the king of Sparta, when they were married, when they got together, a pact was formed that if anyone should try and steal Helen from him, they would go to war and to get back Helen. So there were all these ducks in a row. It was kind of like the beginning of World War I, where all these nations were lined up against each other, ready to go to war. Well, that's what happened as soon as Helen was abducted and taken off to to Troy. Um, the point of the story is that Eris is in most quarters is blamed actually for starting the Trojan War. From the reading that I've done, I've determined that it really wasn't Eris who was responsible. It was Helen. I mean, what the hell was she doing, running off with this boy toy, Trojan boy toy, to go off somewhere else in the Mediterranean? The story also has a much different ending, because at the end of the Trojan War, Aeneas, who's very, very well known in mythology, who was also a Trojan royal himself, left Troy, or what was left of it anyway, and sailed to Italy. And he married into the royal lineage of the Italian peninsula at the time. And it was his offspring, his future generations that he created, who founded the city of Rome. And the city of Rome, the Roman Empire, has lasted to this day. We see it mostly through the Roman Catholic Church and Latin culture, but it was quite a lasting achievement. And I suggest that Eris has this capability, that she may start things, out of some disruption, something that causes, great grief or a problem, or, unbelievable losses. But in the end, something very great comes of it. And this is the story that I would like to tell today. This is the trail of crumbs through the forest of the time that we are passing through, in my opinion. So this is a quote from the Southern Poverty Law Center in a little pamphlet that they produced called Hating Extremism in 2022. Excuse me, let me just take a drink. If we want to understand the future, we have to understand the past and the present. And they wrote that there has been a disturbing rise in hate incidents in our country. The uptick in hate-fueled activity is part of a larger, hard-right movement that stokes the fires of anti-Semitism and racism, promoting fear and extremist violence. White supremacy has gone mainstream, which increasingly threatens people of color, the US education system, and democracy itself. And another part of this same report, they wrote that in a leaked audio first reported by the UK outlet Byline Times, a YouTube performer utters a string of racist and anti-gay epithets before stating that he wishes someone would press the button to wipe Jews off the face of the earth. This quote from George Santayana is always something I've held on to. Those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it. And it's actually inscribed on one of the history buildings here in Santa Fe. So if we want to understand the past and present, we have to really look at what has happened in the times that we just has recently passed through. The Capitol riot, I think, stands out as probably the most important thing that we've experienced politically, perhaps since the election of Donald Trump, but he was part of that. And as part of that, we had the Proud Boys and the Oath Keepers, which is really who they're referring to in that Southern Journal article. We all lived through COVID. It was, and it's still around. And I'm not entirely sure that it's completely gone, or that an intelligent virus is that it's the last that we've seen of a self-replicating, self-mutating virus. The Ukraine war, I think, is the latest crisis that's really on the table, because even though the United States does not have troops or boots on the ground, we are actively involved. The missiles that the Ukrainians have taken from the U.S. military are being guided by U.S. intelligence. We're right there. We're just sitting in the back room. We're not on the battlefield, but we are part of this war. And the Chinese have also been quite active, and we just saw the latest evidence of it in the espionage balloons that have been floating over the United States. I don't believe that they're UFOs. I'm sorry, I just can't go down that road. But I think that that's just what they're saying, because they're trying to not inflame the Chinese by shooting down their equipment. And even more disturbing are the military exercises, which were going on, almost on a daily basis, of hundreds of flyovers and whole armadas of troops and ships around the island of Taiwan, threatening Taiwan. We all know about Donald Trump. I don't want to dwell on it. Even his name is something that I don't even like to say. But he's obviously, again, part of what has happened at the time that we're passing through. Remember that Eris's daughter is lawlessness, and Donald Trump embodies lawlessness. He's been a role model for young people, for teenagers, for people who just don't have any sense of who they are. They figure, wow, if he can get away with it, so can I. And most recently, what's been revealed about Jared Kushner and the Saudis and the $2.5 billion that they gave him, and he never reported in order to start his equity company. This is all, these are the people at the highest levels of our government. Gun violence, the mass shootings, school shootings, and kids with guns. This is something, again, that is just way off the scale of normalcy and what we can expect in a peaceful society. And we'll come back to peace, because our country has always been very much about peace and equilibrium and balance. But recently we have really fallen off the wagon. The catastrophic weather, the weather itself. I think that this is the Earth itself is the elephant in the room to a great degree. The Earth is clearly going through its own series of changes. We live on the Earth. We are part of the Earth. We're not separate from it. We're not on it. We are of it, in it, part of it. It's all one singularity. And what is happening to the planet is happening to us, and it's expressing itself through the weather and through the Schumann resonance, which is the Earth's energetic field. The authoritarianism around the world, not just Donald Trump, but Bolsonaro in Brazil and Modi in Italy. And there was an article recently that there's something like 47 countries in the planet right now with authoritarian regimes. The political polarity right now in our country and around the world is not only excessive, it's really at a maximum. And police brutality, when I talk about Vesta and the Vestals, and Vesta as the energetically as an asteroid, about how the Vestals really were responsible for helping heal the Greek and Roman troops who came back from battle. Both of those cultures were also very battle weary, but the troops would come back and spend time with the Vestals. And I'll kind of leave that to your imagination. They weren't virgins at all. A virgin in Roman culture was simply an unmarried woman. And what's happening is that these men are coming back from overseas, from Bandahar, wherever it is that they are, and they're going into law enforcement. They've been psychologically trained to be killers, and there's not a lot of other roles they can perform in society without being, healed and reintegrated. So when things like Ferguson happen, when we see all the the black people who have been slaughtered, just because they were black, there's just no excuse for it. But there's a reason why it's happening, and I don't want to use the word blame, but I think Eris is behind all of these disruptions and cataclysms. But there's also been some good stuff. The women's movement. Let me just look at some figures here. The women's movement. Between 3 million and 5 million people turned out for those marches. It was about almost 2% of the U.S. population, and worldwide the participation was over 7 million. So women are being recognized as important. It's the patriarchy is turning, the wheel is turning, and matriarchy is coming back. It's 6,000 years in the making, and I can't promise that it's going to happen in the next 10 years and even the next 100 years, but we're finally headed back in the right direction. And Black Lives Matter as well. Primary concerns of incidents of police brutality and racially motivated violence, and the killings, Trayvon Martin, Michael Brown, Eric Garner. These are all things that are part of our history that we cannot be proud of. legalization of marijuana and hallucinogenic mushrooms is huge. 21 states have now made marijuana illegal or uh, have stopped making it a punishable crime. And hallucinogenic mushrooms under controlled circumstances are coming back as an important therapy for people who really need to recover from traumatic experiences in their life. Same-sex marriage, as of 2023, marriage between same-sex couples was legally performed and recognized in 33 countries and constituted some 1.35 billion people. And again, solar energy, electric cars, Elon Musk notwithstanding, it's definitely an improvement of helping our environment. Banning the use of plastic bags. They've now started an ordinance here in New Mexico, hoping to be able to ban plastic bags. When we go out, out into the country, there are places where there are fences, and after a windstorm, the fences literally are plastered with plastic bags. So I would like to also take a look at what has come before. And this is the map of the chart of the United States that I use. It's the day that the Revolutionary War began. I've told this story in other talks. I'll just repeat it briefly again here. In my personal opinion, I think that July 4th, 1776 was the country's first birthday. The country had survived a year of warfare with the most powerful military force on the planet and survived. And our founding fathers finally had the cojones to say we are a free and independent state. But it really began on this day, July 6, 1775, when the Second Continental Congress passed an act to bear arms against England and hired George Washington as the commander-in-chief and raised a standing army. When you would declare war, when a colony declares war against its mother country, I think that they become a separate nation. To look at some of the most recent Eris transit to the U.S. chart, from 1950 to 1952, Eris was square U.S. Mars, and it was the Korean War. And all through the 1960s, Eris semi-squared the lunar north node and sesqui-squared U.S. Venus. And we had the assassinations of John Kennedy, Robert Kennedy, and Dr. Martin Luther King. These are indisputable, facts that are revealed. And I have worked with this chart for almost close to 10 years now, 8 or 10 years, and it is remarkably accurate. And I'm not saying that this is the only chart to use. Astrology works, so all astrology works, but I'll show you that there are 26, besides the squares to Pluto that I'm going to talk about a little later in this talk, there are 26 partile aspects to this chart through this period that we're going to discuss. So I want to touch briefly on the outer planets. Again, I'm really focusing on Eris today. Pluto in Aquarius, Neptune in Aries, the Uranus, US Uranus return, Uranus and Gemini are all topics that I'm going to bring up, to this table individually as we go down the road. But they need to be mentioned because the charts that we're going to look at today, Pluto is already in Aquarius, Neptune is already in Aries. And as you'll see, the American Uranus return occurs smack dab in the middle of the 9 squares from Eris to Pluto that I'm going to talk about. So we have to understand that Aquarius is air, and it follows Capricorn, earthbound, generative, structural, crystallizing. Capricorn crystallizes things. Aquarius comes along and shakes up that crystallization. It disrupts and interrupts and shatters those crystallized forms so that something else can take its place. This is what we're going through. We have not had Pluto in Aquarius yet. We've had Saturn there. We've had Jupiter there. They have done their work, and we have experienced, this Aquarian energy. COVID, Donald Trump, Ukraine, Putin. I've talked about all of these things already. This is all of the disruptions and interruptions to our normalcy that are necessities that have to happen in order for things to change the way that they are. We can't continue to take 2 steps back and 1 step forward. We have to. Evolutionary only goes in a forward direction, even when it seems like we're moving backwards. And I have to add this: it's partially a joke and partially not. If Pluto heralds the age of Aquarius, it would be naive to expect it to be about a band of hippies dancing around in the park singing Broadway tunes. We have seen what Aquarius energy looks like, up close and personal. So with Pluto and Aquarius, we need to expect more of the same. And Neptune moving into Aries is really the same kind of very dynamic, dramatic change, because we're going from water to fire. Neptune has been very comfortable in its own water sign. It's now about to move into fire, the fire element. And it's going from the 12th house to the first house. That's a very liminal space. It's birth. And as you'll see later, I'll talk about this a little bit. It's a rebirthing experience, but it was. I'm not sure exactly where the original quote came from, but was the Black author who he said, not by water, but fire next time, and Neptune is bringing in that fire. James Baldwin. So this is the first of the 9 charts, and this first square occurs on June 1st, 2026. And what I've done is in Solar Fire, I've just isolated aspects from Eris, transiting, which is Eris in this outer blue wheel, and Eris natally in the US chart. This inner light green circle is the US chart that I just showed you. And this outer light blue circle are the transits on June 1st, 2026. And I've circled the Eris in both of those wheels. So many, as I flip through these charts and we work through them, you're going to see that because Eris moves so slowly, these same aspects are going, for the most part, to persist through the entire cycle of 9 squares. But there will be, some others that will pop up, for a slower time period. But the one that really jumps out at me in this chart, obviously, is this yod for Mars and Ceres. This is Ceres down here, not Pallas Athena. The second in conjunct is to Ceres, pointing directly at Eris. And we know that Mars is war, but Mars also are the choices that we make, our personal choices. It's the lower octave of Pluto. Pluto's our deepest unconscious needs for security, hands those deep desires for security off to Mars to act on, and Mars makes the conscious choices to direct them forward. So what this yacht is about are the choices that we have made. You see that Mars is widely conjunct Neptune. It's separating from conjunction to Neptune here in the 12th house. Again, I don't want to dwell too much on it because I could spend a whole day just talking about the U.S. chart itself. But this is stuff that's hidden. It's things going on behind the scenes. It's not so much our subconscious. This is our collective unconscious. This is the zeitgeist in terms of our family. This is our country. This is a mundane chart. But if this was a person, this would be the stuff that's really going on in their visions and inspirations and intuition. As part of a mundane chart, it's really stuff that is hidden. It refers to hospitals and asylums. A lot of things that are hidden: spies, secret enemies, and criminals. I think the criminal word is again what jumps out at me, because we have seen criminality at the highest level of our government. And politics is probably the dirtiest business, on the planet. I don't think, if to really find a totally honest politician who's not tied for, his political funding from big corporations is like finding a needle in a haystack. And I'm not saying that they're bad people for taking money from Gulf Oil or whoever it is they take it, because politics, it takes a lot of money to get elected. The problem is not with the politicians. The problem is with our system. And what it really indicates is that we need to get money out of politics. If we could get money out of politics, we might get a whole different class of individuals who are willing to take the helm and help steer our country forward. And I think that this is a lot of what this is about in terms of making the choices that we have to make going forward. Series, is about loss. From an EA perspective, series is where we experience our deepest personal loss. Demeter lost her daughter, Persephone. She was taken down into the underworld. There's nothing worse in life than a parent who has to bury a child. There's no worse experience in life for a parent. It doesn't get worse than that. So it is at that level. And here is Eris at the focal point of all this, driving these losses. And everybody is really very much aware of how things have changed. I think that it's just necessary to report that we cannot expect things to stop changing, for the normalcy to continue to be taken away. We have to expect things to continue along the track that they're on until they get better, which is the best hope that I can give you. Eris is also trining Venus. And in this chart, Venus is the ruler of the ascendant. 0 degrees of Libra is the ascendant for the United States in this chart. And it strikes me again as very accurate, because we are about equality. We are about balance and equilibrium and fairness. We're the first. We're a social experiment. The first government on the planet that attempted, and we're still working at it, of government by the governed. We have no king. We elect the people who are going to make the laws and regulations that we all have to agree to. But it's all under a Libra banner, if you would. So the trine is all about peace and war. It's about diplomacy, and it's about finding that equilibrium that we're working to restabilize as a country who we are, and as families who we are, and as people who we are, all under this kind of energy. And there's also an inconjunct as well to Mars in this chart, which I spoke at. I'm sorry, I spoke to that. We have the first partile square to Pluto of 25 degrees of Eris to 25 degrees of Capricorn. And I categorize this again as evolutionary cataclysms, which we've already experienced. The reason that these 9 squares are so relevant is because we're just coming out of the Eris to Pluto square transit-wise. But the difference is that since the United States was also born with Pluto and Capricorn, Eris is also squaring the US Pluto, which is really what this talk is about. And the difference is that Pluto transit-wise is moving away, and they're going to move out of orbit at some point. But the Eris in the US chart is stationary, and for all intents and purposes, Eris is stationary. So this is a very long-term, powerful, very powerful influence that's going to really occur over the next close to 30 years. Its impact will be felt. It's not just 10 years or 20 years, but we're looking at 2 to 3 decades of the influences of what's going to occur later on in this decade. We've got a semi-square to Jupiter, about the religious right, about border issues and major court cases. Again, these are some of the items, the things that just fill the news. The religious right is more self-empowered than ever. And we're supposed to have a division of religion and state and religion, but that seems to have fallen by the wayside. Uranus is squaring US Eris. So again, this is chaos and disruptions and lawlessness. We see it every day. It's just here in Santa Fe, one of the things I say about driving down the road that a yellow light it means drive faster, and a red light means I'm going anyway. So it's people have just taken the hint from the leaders of people who are the role models, and again they figure, well, if they can get away with it, I can get away with it at my level. And we're going to see that there are many aspects as well to Vesta, throughout these charts. Again, Vesta is about our authenticity, our personal authenticity, but that's again a very wide spectrum of expression. And in the distortion of that wide, that authenticity, you get somebody like Jared Kushner, who's able to go and make a deal with the Saudis. We don't know what he gave them. I fear he gave them nuclear codes. I don't know what they gave away out of all those secret documents. But the point is that they have no conscience. There's no boundary as to what they will do. It's gangsterism. It's absolute lawlessness. So what we're going to see as I flip through these charts is that once a year, Eris stations retrograde, and currently it's in January, it's in July, and then stations direct again every January. So we're going to see that as we go through this part of the year, we're going to see that applying these solid line aspects are going to become dotted lines separating. Again, as we alternate back and forth. So the second chart is September 11th. And again, that's, an important date in American history. It's the anniversary of 9/11, and not coincidentally, in 2026. And it also is right smack, at the beginning of the US Uranus return. And I have Uranus highlighted up here and US Uranus up at the top of the chart. There's an inconvenient truth that every time the United States the Eris has been in the sign of Gemini, the United States has gone to war. I think I may have this no, I don't have it. I thought I had this in a chart. I don't have the dates here, but the American Revolution, obviously, Uranus was in Gemini. We were at war. The Civil War, the late 1850s, 1858, 1859, was not quite the Civil War, but it was the beginning of it. It was all of the struggle over slavery. And, at that time, the United States was not the United States. It was really just a confederation of separate states, each one with their own economic agenda, political agenda, religious agenda. The Civil War performed an important function in American history because at the end of the Civil War, for the first time, there was a United States. The war did that. So again, it's an indication that struggle is necessity. That Jeff Green used to say, that we as human beings, we only learn through direct emotional experience. We can read the books and get the how-to books and advice, and our friends and our neighbors and even our partners and our family will tell us about something that we need to change. But until we have a direct emotional experience of why we need to make that change, it doesn't happen. And collectively, this is what we are all passing through. COVID, Donald Trump, the threat of global war, all of this is to wake us up to what needs to change, because it hasn't happened because we were just waiting for somebody to do it. We're the ones we've been waiting for. Nobody's coming here to help us. Unless we do this ourselves, it's not going to happen. So you see many of these same aspects are still here. The opposition to the moon is important as well, because it really reflects the reemergence of femininity and the matriarchy in the world. The moon in this chart as well, though, is the ruler of the 10th house. It's the presidency. So it really is about the government, and it's how the head of our government is functioning. I certainly don't condone what happened on January 6th, but I understand it, because for many years, really since I was 20, 30 years of my life, I never felt that there was a presidential candidate who supported my views. Uh, both political parties are not federal organizations. They are private organizations, and they have no sanction to, pick somebody according to what, anything but their own prerogatives. So we didn't get Elizabeth, we didn't get Bernie, we got Joe Biden. Joe Biden's a good man. I don't have an issue with him. He's certainly not Donald Trump. But from my perspective, and again, this is just my personal opinion, I felt that they gave us somebody we hope we would be happy with, going back to the Clinton years somehow, rather than actually moving forward. This is what we've been going through. We're not really going forward. We just keep going back and around in circles. And this again, this is the opposition to this movement. Yes, it is women's rights, women's movement, women's needs and issues, but it also represents the presidency itself. And there's this tremendous pressure on it from Eris that's been here really for almost 2 decades. Eris has been hanging out opposite the US moon. You see, it's a 20, it's a 25. It's taken quite some time to go from 20 to 25, and it's still very active. And in this chart, we have Uranus actually with an inconjunct, a gibbous inconjunct here to US Eris, and so it's just adding fuel to the fire. The US return is really just going to feed the cataclysms that have been going on politically, socially, and economically for our country. There's not really going to be any relief. We can see here that the Yod is separating, but we also have this square from Neptune, which again is created some diffusion, some obfuscation, perhaps. The seventh house in a mundane chart are other countries that we have relationships with, and we've got this a lot of activity here in the seventh house of these planets transiting the seventh house of the country. So it does indicate that there's authoritarianism, perhaps. There is things that are being hidden that we're not being told. Again, there's the Vesta here is the authenticity. Chiron, is the wounded healer, and it just, really, Chiron is also quite active in this chart. Chiron is, just look at this because there's too much for me to keep in my head. There actually is an aspect in this chart to Chiron, but it's going to show up later, where we're being both mentored and wounded at the same time. And the wounding is the mentoring, is the teaching. The wounds that we are suffering are teaching us what we need to do. Eris is also in a partile trine and sextile to the lunar nodes, these dark blue lines here. The lunar, this is the future, and this is our past. And what we need to do is come to terms with what's happened in the past and reimage it and understand that everything we've come through was really for our own good, and to revise the past, not to repeat the past into the future and keep going around and around and around, living the past and really not creating the future that many of us are hoping for in one form or another. The next chart comes up on May 7th. And again, we see the same basic aspects in the chart, but this time they're direct again. And so they're applying. So they're enforcing. And what's happening is this fluctuation back and forth is going to create incidents and situations where events are going to occur, and then there's going to be a response or a learning period or an adjustment period in the retrograde or the separating cycle, which we're going to deal with, because Eris is also flipping back and forth between a retrograde and a direct motion as each of these go through, and that's what's accounting for the separating or applying aspects to happen. It's really being affected by Eris, whether she's moving away or moving back in again. But again, you see the same, you see the nodal aspects, the opposition to the moon, the Yod to Mars and Ceres, and the square to Venus, the square to Neptune are all very active. And in full force. We get to October of 2027, October 8th, and there's a couple of little changes here, things that are different. We still have the yod, but we've got a new yod down here from Jupiter. And just verify that series and sorry, I'm just trying to flip through my notes. There's a lot here to look at. This is Vesta and the South Node and Jupiter, clearly. And this is Eris down here. I talked about Vesta a little bit. It's about authenticity. Again, it works two ways. It can be a very honest expression of self, being really a self-realization experience, or it can be just reverting back to some ancestral pattern that we have been unable to shake off. And to a great degree, that's a lot of what we're experiencing. Excuse me. We've got a trine here as well from Chiron to US Eris. And again, we're going to have learning experiences. We're going to have experiences where it's going to necessitate learning something new, and not just learning it, but doing it, but actualizing it, making it part of who we are individually and collectively as a country. These are non-negotiable. The Eris does not negotiate. These are all non-negotiable events that we're going to have to deal with, just like COVID and Donald Trump. We didn't get to choose, and we still may not get to choose. We're going to have to respond rather than react, and come to terms with it individually and collectively as a country. As we get into 2028 in April, again, we have the same basic aspects, but Eris is really drilling down on Jupiter and Uranus, and this Jupiter-Uranus in the 9th house in the U.S. chart is really the core of our American beliefs. This is our sense of individuality. This is our sense of justice. This is our sense of fairness. This is our sense that health and well-being and prosperity should be available to all. It's not something just for a reserved 2% or 1% of the population. And this is, again, is going to be part of this Uranus return. That's again, that's really underscoring all of these charts. Very, very, very active, very important. I've also got Eris here also semi-sextiling Pluto and semi-squaring Ceres. So these are both struggles. A semi-sextile is a 30-degree angle, and the 30 degrees between any two signs is almost like an inconjunct. There's nothing in common. One is yin, one is yang, one may be fire, one may be air. There's no commonality at all. So there's a struggle that occurs to synthesize what's happening between those two planets. So Pluto is struggling with Eris. Eris is struggling with Pluto in order to find some basis of agreement, to find some common ground, in terms of identity and personality. These 4th and 5th houses here. Who are we as a country, and how do we express who we are as a country? I don't know if anybody who's traveled overseas and seen a busload of Americans get off the bus, dressed like they were going to the supermarket. I've seen it more than once, and sometimes I'm like appalled at it, because foreigners come to our country and they take care to look good, to look well, to not just be okay. I digress. The sesqui-square here, this is also a Ceres return as well, which I think is significant. Both of them are retrograde. They're not quite exact. They're off by about 6 degrees, but they move quickly. So it's a fairly active aspect. And this is also a semi-square. It's a little bit of a crisis to Eris, where there's going to be this sense of how have we nurtured ourselves? How have we taken care of who we are? This is the second house. It's about what's essential, what we need for survival. Have we really squandered our resources? Have we squandered the things that are the necessities for life? And have we also squandered the principles upon which the country was founded and which are essential for democracy? Because democracy itself is at stake. Just like in many cases, our own personal health is at stake with issues like COVID. Situations like COVID. Again, these are non-negotiable. We don't have any choice unless we pick up the ball and run with it. We're going to lose the game. October 30th, 2028. This chart's got some different things going on in it. Saturn now is in play, and Saturn has now moved into a trine with Eris. Again, this could have a couple of different possibilities. Saturn is authority and structure, but Saturn also brings mastery and skills. And moving through this eighth house in the chart, which is our subconscious and where we really do the work, Scorpio's house, it's going to be opportunities to take responsibility for ourselves and to do some of the work that needs to get done in order to resolve some of the crises that we're clearly going to be experiencing moving forward, and to take charge of it and accept that we are responsible for what happens to us. Again, nobody's coming to save us. It's really in our own backyard. We've also got Eris Eris in an inconjunct down here. This is that same yacht. I'm sorry. So that's really what's new. Eris is trining Venus as well. Again, this gives me hope that we will begin to learn what equality means, what equilibrium means, what balance means, that we'll be able to present a new face to the world, because Venus, Libra, that's our face to the world. That's how the world sees us. Mundane astrology says that this is the people and the people's welfare. It is all that. But if we also look at the country as a person, the first house is how we meet the world. And the ascendant is that. And so we need to meet the world as that equal partner, not as, better than or, above or, to be able to find equilibrium in the world around us and not feel that, somehow Americans are the best, because the truth is that we are losing our dominance in the world. We gained that dominance sometime after World War II, but it's fading quickly. And both China and Russia are quite active in picking up the pieces where we have dropped the ball. It's pretty clear that we're facing the pressures that we're facing are not just the climate. They're not just the supply chain shortages and not being able to get enough eggs in the supermarket, that the price of natural gas has skyrocketed and many families are suffering and not even be able to buy those eggs as often as they need to because they've got to pay to heat their house this winter. Things that we're dealing with on a personal level. We're also, in essence, under attack, not quite yet militarily, but from overseas. Where the Chinese and the Russians want to make great inroads into, really becoming the dominant, player on the planet, and leaving us in the dust. And they will show no mercy. They're gladiators, and they will easily, just do whatever they need to do to win the battle. 2029, March 25th. Again, we have this powerful yod. We have the aspects to the lunar nodes. But here we have the south node conjunct US Sun opposite Eris. This is a powerful, interesting placement. And it indicates, something going on. The 10th house and the Sun in particular is the presidency, is our government. So, in 2029, there could be some true competition, some a whole new way of facing the presidential election, new choices perhaps, new perspectives could appear. We could come through this, with some new options, hopefully, being able to have some better leadership, a leadership that's more progressive, more interested in really moving the country forward, not just kind of sustaining the past or sustaining, what has been, but to be progressive. Uh, more There'll be a Mars return. There's a hope for new choices, again, new options, being able to make new choices. Mars conjunct Saturn, taking more responsibility for our national choices. New prospects, new perspectives are possible as we come through this. It runs its gamut. The end of 2029 in November. Again, this is pretty much the same aspects. Saturn is still trining here. We've got still have the square from Eris to Eris, though it's moving excuse me, this is Neptune moving out of orb. It's really nothing here has changed. Nothing here has changed. It's just moved again. It's flipped back and forth between direct and applying and separating as Eris goes from retrograde and direct each year, forcing us to go back and retrace our steps and look at the choices that we've made, look at the options we have, and to choose some new options and make some new choices. The last of the squares occurs on February 28th, 2030, the end of the 4-year transit. And again, we're seeing the same influences. These are all long term. We will have come through our Uranus return. The Pluto return will obviously be well over. The majority of the planets are really moving through the western side of the chart, which is an indication that most of the things that will be impacting our life here will be coming from outside of the United States in one way or another. There's still a lot going on in terms of our own development as a people and as a country, as we really work and form a new personality, have a new personality and expression in the world, outward expression of who we are, and really begin to refine our relationship with ourselves, understand ourselves better as we move through this sixth house and begin to actually move up here into this part of the chart as the 2030s unfold, and begin to perhaps enter the world community as a different individual with a different set, with values that are more proactive and more really beneficial and balanced and equilibrium, not just for us, but for the world itself, to maybe create potentials for more of a world community rather than just like before the Civil War, a lot of individual states really just out for themselves as much as they can grab and get it before the other guy gets it. To be able to come together as a world community, which was a concept that began with the League of Nations and has not terribly succeeded with the United Nations, but we never go backward. We just go forward. Sometimes we have to go back in order to pick up the pieces. But it's my hope that that's the way we will come through this, with a whole different vision of our world, and still perhaps as world leaders. It remains to be seen what will occur. So the point of this is that we're being extruded. Extrusion is the process of forming something by forcing it or pushing it out, especially through a small opening. And there's no question that we are being forced through a very, very tight, through the narrows, very, very tight space in order to find our freedom. But we have to remember that this is a collective rebirthing. And everything that we do, everything that happens to us in life is formatted by intention, and it's intention that's driven by emotional investment. We really are dreaming our future. Our future has not been created yet. It doesn't just happen. It's a result of the collective dream. And the more that we can direct that dream towards what is necessary for our survival, and our survival not just as individuals or not just as our country, but for the planet and for the world community itself, and invest that with emotional intensity to get our emotional intensity behind it. That's how we can move things forward. We're always moving forward, even if when it seems like we're moving backward or we're feeling stuck. We are working on something that when we're feeling stuck, we're working on something that was skipped over. Evolutionary astrology, you know all about skip steps. We didn't get it right the first or second or even the third time, but the ring comes around on the merry-go-round again and again. We keep getting the opportunity to get it right. Just like the river knows its way to the sea, our soul knows the way home. I hope that you enjoyed this, that it gave you something to think about and made sense. Thank you so much for tuning in. Namaste.
Thank you so much, Daniel.
Yes, thank you. It was excellent.
Thank you.